these people free. To make these backward, primitive people required government. They weren't ready for the freedoms and liberties that Britons themselves were entitled to. And again, that's a structuring tension that we'll see throughout in the next month, I suppose. So a few words in conclusion. One of the big things I've been trying to get across to you today is understanding that the great transformations in British society and economy and politics preceded and did not simply follow the emergence of liberalism as a way of understanding it. Okay? That is to say, I've been trying to suggest to you that in a bizarre way, many of the quintessential forms of the modern life that we now understand emerged out of a political and economic order that was profoundly rooted in tradition and in custom. And that liberalism emerged as a critique of that ancient regime, as well as a way of trying to understand these immense changes. So I'm trying to say to you, for instance, that Adam Smith was not describing an economic system that he saw around him. He was trying to bring one into existence as a critique against the ancient regime. Bentham wasn't trying to simply design an ideal thing. He was having to do so against the corrupt and apparently irrational systems of rule that he was surrounded with. The other key point that you need to take away today is that liberalism, in the way that I'm talking to you, is not just a philosophy of economy, of society and of politics. It's also its own type of utopian project trying to produce a new type of person and a new world. Okay? And so therefore that you shouldn't think of liberalism as just being associated with one political theory, one particular theorist or one particular political party. I'm talking about it in a much more general and therefore much more confusing way that I want to highlight to you now. And a key part of what I'm suggesting to you is it becomes the way of trying to rethink the new forms of authority, the new systems of government, the new forms of sociability, the new forms of trade, the new forms of sociability that would emerge out of this new world. Okay? So that it becomes not just a way of understanding them, it increasingly becomes a way of actually ordering the world and providing it with a pattern and a system. And it's that process that we'll basically see happen over the second half of the 19th century. Finally, I don't want to leave you with the idea that Britons all suddenly think of themselves as liberals, okay, and that everybody signs up to this creed. Okay, this process is full of contention. There are critics who prefer the old customary ways of doing things, that prefer the old ancient regime, that prefer the old systems of economic organization and political organization. Okay? And they continue to be vocal and articulate through the 1840s and the 1850s. Nonetheless, by the time you reach 1848, liberalism has become the common sense of the age. Even though they're critics, even though they're exceptions, it is increasingly the way that people think about the world around them. And that is why it's so important, because it comes basically to shape the world in a new type of way in the second half of the 19th century. Huge apologies. I promise promise I won't do this again. And thank you very much for your patience